Dare to enter Crow's Quill's books, where tales of forgotten realms and fearless souls come alive. Today's journey, Operation DarkStar, Chapter 20 to Chapter 22, by Mark Lindsay. Will you uncover the truth hidden in the shadows? Chapter 20. It had been a while since the noises had stopped. How long she had been down in the tunnel, the young girl had no idea. The savage, inhuman sounds of the monsters tearing and eating her mother and Mr. Bloom had echoed loudly through the tunnel. They would haunt her to her dying day, but the silence that followed was infinitely much worse. Any doubt that her mother may still be alive was over, and the selfless part of her brain contemplated that the creatures would now be coming after her. Her legs felt numb and her stomach nauseous. Paige couldn't remember the last time she had eaten, but her main concern was that she had been taking every turn in the darkness in the hope that the monsters would be unable to find her. She suspected that they would have super keen senses like an animal. She was afraid she would never find her way out of the maze like tunnels and die in the darkness. Her breath was coming in ragged gasps, and she knew she would soon have to stop. The subway tunnels, built nearly 100 years earlier, joined onto the outlying storm drain system that tied into the city and suburban areas. Over the years, the city and local councils had refurbished and modernized most of it, but there wasn't a complete set of blueprints that could effectively map the entire network. When their train had stopped, they had been on the very outskirts of the city, and since she had taken off into the tunnel system alone, Paige had managed to travel several miles towards the northern residential areas. She was just about to stop when she heard the deafening roar of rushing water, like a waterfall. Following the noise, it eventually led the young girl from the tunnel and into a large underground area. Water poured in from a giant steel grill overhead and down into an open trough to her front, where the captured water was carried away to the city water treatment center. Paige could see a steel ladder bolted to the far wall that traveled vertically up towards the grill located on the roof. The only way across the raging waters to the ladder at the far end was a narrow steel girder, half a foot wide. She shivered in the dark and wet, hugging herself in an attempt to get warm. Paige contemplated her options. Going back was out of the question, but the idea of climbing the ladder that stood close to 6 meters in height also seemed impossibly daunting. And that didn't include crossing the wide trough where one slip meant falling into its running waters and certain death by drowning. Young Paige sat down on the cold concrete and hugged her knees, tears welling in her eyes. "It's not fair," Paige sobbed quietly. A screeching cry echoed down from the tunnel, and Paige jumped to her feet, terrified, her heart beating like a jackhammer. Wiping the tears from her face, she stepped quickly towards the steel girder and prepared to cross. Another roar bellowed out from where she had come, and in that instant Paige realized that both monsters that had killed her mother and Mr. Bloom had now come for her. Shaking with fear, the young girl held her arms straight out in an attempt to maintain balance. She took her first step. She had managed to take several steps. However, she was not even halfway across the trough. The water rained down overhead made the journey slippery and hard to maintain balance. The cries of madness and hunger were getting louder from the tunnel, despite willing herself to do otherwise. Paige cast a quick glance behind and saw the flash of glowing eyes making their way hungrily up the tunnel towards her. "No, no!" Paige babbled as she swung back around and took another quick step towards freedom. But in her haste, her foot slipped on steel, and the young girl lost her balance and fell. Only at the last second was she able to grasp onto the steel beam, her legs hanging precariously over the edge, feet lapping in the water. The creature slowly walked up from the tunnel. It could see perfectly in the darkness on a visual spectrum, that no human being could comprehend. It could hear the water, but more importantly, it could hear the heartbeat of the child and smell its enticing aroma. Its jaw quivered in anticipation of an easy meal. The young girl struggled for purchase, her numb hands and fingers finding it increasingly harder to hold on. Gripping for all she was worth, she somehow managed to swing one leg over the steel beam. Then, clenching the underside of her knee, she forced herself inch by inch up until she sat atop the girder, in the process losing one of her shoes to the water below. The first creature exited the tunnel and entered the open sewer system, its eyes firmly on the young girl, who was whimpering loudly and attempting to escape. The creature roared its dissatisfaction at its fleeing prey and advanced on. The water cascading down was making it harder and harder to see clearly. Paige was relying purely on touch as she crawled for her life. The monster had now reached the steel beam and was now too attempting to cross. The second beast had now also entered the open area. It too screeched excitedly when it saw the fleeing girl. Fingers struggled to get a hold on the smooth concrete on the far side of the trough. Paige shimmied off the beam and attempted to clear her vision. The creature that followed found the trek much easier due to long, taloned fingers that wrapped carefully around the girder. It was now only several meters from the girl. It hissed, readying to leap the final way. So focused on its prey, it hadn't noticed the large figure descending down the ladder, only sensing something wrong at the last moment. A large axe was swung hard and fast, its chrome head finding its target in the demon's skull. Thick black blood gushed out, no time to even scream. Jared ripped the steel from the creature's head and let the beast fall into the rushing water of the trough. It was gone, taken away in seconds. Wasting no time, he launched the axe at the second monster located on the far side of the trough. It hit the creature in the chest, knocking it roughly to the ground. Adrenaline had run its course. Fatigue and fear had left Paige to the point of exhaustion. She was barely aware of what was occurring, thinking that death had finally come for her. She closed her eyes and hoped it wouldn't hurt. The giant ex-firefighter retrieved his thrown axe, and after several more blows to the fallen creature, dumped it into the waters of the sewer. He stood over the young girl, passed out from exhaustion, and scooped her easily into the crook of his arm. Carefully brushing the wet hair from the girl's face, he regarded her features, trying hard not to think of his own daughter, and with practiced ease, he climbed the ladder back out of the sewer and into the darkness beyond. Chapter 21. Since the events at the club, crawling through a dirty tunnel and their run-in with the angry mob, Tarnay had completely lost his patience with everything. Stewing in his bad mood, he walked silently up the street, propping Cynthia by the arm, her twisted ankle getting worse by the minute. "I don't know how much further I can go," Cynthia winced, her complaining getting on Tarnay's nerves. "Well, we don't exactly have many options," Tarnay said testily. "This isn't my fault, you know. How was I supposed to know that the world was going to end tonight?" "Shh," Tarnay hissed. "And I didn't know that I was going to hurt myself." "Shh. And I'm sorry for being such a burden to you," Cynthia started to blubber. "God damn it, woman. What part of shut the fuck don't you understand?" Tarnay growled and came to an abrupt halt. Cynthia looked as if she'd just been slapped. "Do you not understand exactly what the hell is going on? We're in a major life and death situation here. Probably the worst kind anyone could be faced with, and all you can do is bloody complain. Loudly. You'll end up attracting the wrong kind of attention and get us both killed," Tarnay said in a low, angry tone. Cynthia was completely gobsmacked. Her large, tear-filled eyes stared up at him. Then she began to cry. "I'm scared, okay? I don't want to die. My ankle hurts and I'm filthy, Cynthia moaned. Tarnay took a deep breath and quickly looked around, his eyes settling on something across the road. The ex-Marine propped the girl next to a lamppost, then strode across the road. "What are you doing?" Cynthia asked. Tarnay ignored her and her question, instead picking up a length of pipe lying on the road, swinging it several times like a baseball player testing his bat prior to taking the field. He was now standing in front of a department store window. Faceless mannequins stared back dispassionately as Tarnay swung the pipe and the window exploded. He turned back and faced his work colleague. "One thing at a time," Tarnay said casually. With the power in the city mysteriously drained, the store's security alarms hadn't gone off when Tarnay smashed his way inside. He was quick to drag Cynthia off the street and into the relative safety of the store's interior. "Wait right here. I'll be back in a minute," Tarnay advised before she voiced her concerns. The ex-Marine wasted no time visiting various areas and collecting a vast variety of items in a steel shopping trolley, and true to his word, was back by Cynthia's side in less than 10 minutes. "What on earth have you been doing?" Cynthia questioned. Without answering, he tossed a pair of sturdy work boots at her feet. "You look like a size 8.5, Tarnay said matter of fact. Along with the boots, he had scrounged a first aid kit with which he strapped the young woman's ankle with, several tubs of clean wipes to clean up, as well as various heavy workman pants and jackets. "You didn't find any food in your travels?" Cynthia asked. "As a matter of fact, we're in luck," Tarnay replied, producing several bags of beef jerky and 2 big bottles of Gatorade. "This should keep us going for a little while longer," Tarnay added. Despite everything they had currently gone through, Cynthia smiled as she tore into the jerky, washing it down with several gulps of the grape-flavor energy drink. "Oh God, that is the best thing I have ever tasted," Cynthia said with a sigh, followed by a long, loud belch. "Everything is better when you survive death," Tarnay said with a grin. "Is that why you went to Afghanistan? The rush?" Cynthia asked. "Actually, I went to serve my country. And if I hadn't hurt my back in that IED explosion, I'd still be doing it," Tarnay said testily. Cynthia regretted her question immediately. "I'm sorry, that was rude. And to top it off, I haven't even thanked you for saving my life. So thank you," Cynthia said. "No need to thank me. This is pure survival now. Humanity is now officially on the endangered species list," Tarnay replied. "You don't think it's really that bad, do you?" Cynthia asked. "Look around. Whatever the fuck this is, it's everywhere," Tarnay said. "So we just give up?" "On the contrary, I plan on making it through this shitstorm," Tarnay said. "And me?" "You too, if you don't piss me off," Tarnay chuckled. After they ate, Tarnay urged them to continue on. Cynthia tested her foot. Now that it had been strapped and secured in a high boot, she was surprised to see that the pain was minimal. "How is it?" Tarnay asked. "Actually, very tolerable," Cynthia said, extending her foot up and down, waiting for the pain to start, elated when it didn't. "Good, because we have a bit of walking ahead of us," Tarnay said, shouldering a small backpack full of supplies. Chapter 22. They drove without lights, in an unlit industrial area trying to find an unmarked secret government installation. "Are we there yet?" Tommy asked, and despite himself, Scott laughed. "What's so funny?" Bethany asked. "I was just thinking that's such a typical, normal, mundane question to ask, despite our current circumstances." Scott chuckled, and Bethany joined him. Her 2 children looked on confused, not understanding what was so funny and why they would be laughing when there were monsters roaming the streets. After several minutes, Bethany broke the silence. "Why is this happening?" she asked. Scott was silent as he turned a corner. "If I was to hazard a guess, I'd say it's the end." "Biblically speaking," Scott replied. "Do you really believe that?" Bethany asked, alarmed. "I'm not a religious man, but the stuff we've seen tonight now makes me believe in a hell at least," Scott said. He was concentrating on the maze of deserted roads, each one looking the same as the last. Factories and warehouses everywhere. Something caught his eye at the end of the street. He sped up towards it. A plain concrete building, no windows, sealed off by a chain-link fence. "We're here," Scott said. Bethany looked outside the car window, unimpressed with what she saw. "Are you sure this doesn't look much different than the other buildings around us?" she replied. "To the untrained observer, maybe, but I guarantee this is the place. This is the only fence with razor wire attached to it. I can also see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 cameras situated around the front," Scott said. Bethany was having a good look now. "You can see the blinking red light on the cameras," Bethany said. "Very good. We haven't seen power anywhere, which means this place has its own backup," Scott said. "Those are all very good points. However, that hardly screams secret government agency," Bethany said. "Okay. There also that emblem by the gate," Scott said, pointing at a small tin sign wired at the foot of the front gate. A white background, with a pyramid in the center and the letter C superimposed over the top of it, all in plain black lines, except the letter C was in red. The sign was old and faded. "What does that mean?" Bethany asked, unimpressed. "The 3 corners of the pyramid represent government, intelligence agencies, and the military. The letter C means covert," Scott said. "Covert." In red. "Not very subtle," Bethany scoffed. "If I hadn't pointed it out, would you really suspect it of being a property of any consequence?" "Be honest?" Scott asked. "Well, no, I suppose not," Bethany replied. "And that's the point. We hide in plain sight. Unless you know what to look for. These places are kept as a last resort," Scott said, turning the engine off and leaving the keys in the ignition. "What do we do now?" Rosalind asked, fascinated by what the grown-ups were talking about. "We wait. If there is anyone home, it shouldn't take any longer than 30 minutes. "What shouldn't take any longer than 30 minutes?" Bethany asked. There was a loud metallic crack outside Scott's open window. They all turned in its direction. 2 figures dressed entirely in black were standing by the car. One was armed with an automatic shotgun, the other a small, compact assault rifle. Their muzzles pointed at the occupants of the Jeep. "Nobody move! Keep your hands where we can see them," one of the figures instructed. Scott kept his hands on the steering wheel. "Lieutenant Scott Lane, Special Forces Operational Detachment Delta. My ID number is 13-316-289. I was on leave when all this occurred. Thought it best to make my way here," Scott said in a calm, neutral tone. The 2 armed persons regarded each other quickly. No words spoken. However, it appeared as if they had made a decision on the situation. "Exit the vehicle. Don't attempt to carry anything out. If you are armed, give the weapons to the driver, who will place them all in the bag," one of the figures instructed. He had a black sack which he held open. "Do not make any sudden moves, or try anything stupid. A 3rd member of our team has a bead on you. Stupidity will be met with instant repercussions," they were informed. Scott did as he was instructed. Next, They were each individually cuffed with plasticuffs, then pulled from the car. Lined up like common criminals, they were led to the front gate, which opened automatically. From there, they were led inside. They were led through a series of security doors and into a large room, where they were seated at a plain steel table, the room illuminated by red light. Their captors left without word. "Oh my God! What are we going to do?" Bethany asked hysterically. The sight of her children in handcuffs was playing horrible games with her imagination. "We're fine," Scott said casually. "How can you say that? They've put my children in restraints. How can they do that? It's against the Constitution." "It's against the Constitution," she screamed. "These people work well beyond the Constitution," Scott said, then regretted his statement when he saw her expression. "If they had wanted us dead, we'd be dead," Scott added. "Then why are we here? Why are they doing this to us?" Bethany asked, perplexed. "Remember, we were the ones that arrived on their doorstep. Not to mention, they are dealing with a national emergency unlike anything anyone has ever been witness to before," Scott said. "That's still no right to treat us like this," Bethany said, her voice shrill, her patience long gone. Scott sighed. "You need to relax. We're safer than anyone else in the city. They are currently checking my credentials as we speak," Scott tried to reassure. The door to the room opened, causing the captives to all jump in surprise. "He's right. You need to relax," a figure instructed. He was in his early 50s, iron gray hair at his temples, a square jaw and lean. He pulled up a seat on the other side of the table. He was flanked by two others, one a large, heavily muscled man with a thick black beard, the other a woman in her mid-30s, short brown hair, extremely fit, a vertical scar starting just beneath her left eye. They remained standing, arms crossed. They all carried holstered pistols. "Who are you people?" Bethany asked, half annoyed, half desperate for answers. "I'm sure your Delta friend has told you all about us?" the seated man asked. "He told us we'd be safe, which is why I agreed to bring my children here," Bethany replied. "She's frightened and with good reason. We've all been through hell to get here. No pun intended," Scott said. The seated man regarded him. "You have quite the record, Lieutenant. 3 tours of Afghanistan, numerous citations. Impressive," the man said. "I don't give a shit about that. I know the hornet's nest I've kicked over in coming here. However, these are exceptional times. Protocol goes out the window. Maybe you could remove these restraints and introduce yourselves. That would go well towards creating trust," Scott said calmly, even though his request sounded more like a threat. The older man on the other side of the table regarded his guests closely, looking for any signs of subterfuge. Sighing, he signaled towards the big, bearded man, who stepped forward and, using a small pair of steel pilers, cut the plastic bonds that had them restrained. Scott was the last, rubbing his wrists until the blood returned. "My name is Major Chris Elms. The imposing giant is Sergeant Mike Founder, and the equally imposing young lady is Corporal Megan Breen. Sergeant Bill Mears is currently on PK and conducting his hourly checks. You may see him later," Major Elms said, leaving no misunderstanding into the shaky ground they were all standing on. "Now that we have that out of the way. What brings you here?" Major Elms added. Scott's brow narrowed. What brings us here?" "Are you serious?" Scott replied. "It's a fair question. Or do you think I'm being too evasive?" Elms asked. "This is Bethany and her 2 children, Tommy and Rosalind. They just had to flee their home because monsters have invaded the city." Fucking monsters. Being the free-thinking operator that I am, I thought I would bring them to the one possible place in the city that could provide them with protection. Scott fumed. This isn't some homeless shelter that you can... Sergeant Founder started. How about you shut your mouth, Sergeant? I wasn't speaking to you. Let the adults do the talking. And the thinking, Scott said, now on his feet and pointing his bladed hand into the face of the big, bearded sergeant, who had turned bright red, his massive hands clenched tight into fists. Mike. Megan. Maybe you should go and see how Bill is doing. I'll handle our guests, Elms suggested in a calm, even tone. Sergeant Founder was about to argue against this, but a firm hand, courtesy of Corporal Breen. I think that's a great idea, Breen said, pushing the larger man through the open door, like an older brother. Major Elms waited until they were alone before he continued. We're aware of what is going on in the city, Elms said patiently. So then, we're both in agreement. Bringing them here was completely justified, Scott said, his temper simmering. No, we are not. Just because you were aware of this location, that doesn't give you the authority to just come here unannounced, and with civilians in tow. What the hell were you thinking? Elms accused. Scott took a deep breath, then put on his best smile. He looked like a predatory wolf. I'm not going to argue the point. We're here now. What are you going to do? Scott asked. And I'm telling you, we don't have the facilities to be caring for people, Elms said hotly. Scott jumped up from his chair. Ah, you motherfuckers really give me the shits, Scott growled. Really us motherfuckers, Elms said through gritted teeth. Yeah, the gatekeepers of information. You store it, hoard it, then don't do anything with it. You are no different than me, a servant to the people. This place was designed to... Don't tell me what my job or what this place is, Lieutenant, Elms interjected. This place was designed to turn the tide in the case of a major national emergency. And guess what? That time is now, Scott growled. Major Elms was about to reply when they were bathed in flashing red lights. Elms jumped to his feet. What is it? Scott asked. Perimeter breach. Stay here, Elms growled, exiting the room and closing the door behind him, the clicking locked. It's happening here too. What do we do, Scott? Bethany pleaded. Scott's jaw tensed. I'll tell you what we do. And it's not waiting for Major Payne to return, Scott said, moving towards the locked door. He produced a small pouch from the pocket of his cargo tactical pants. What are you going to do? Tommy asked, clearly enthralled with the Delta operative. Get us out of here, Scott replied with a grin. That seals today's tale in shadows. We hope Operation DarkStar has drawn you deeper into its enigma. Return soon to Crow's Quill's books, where the next chapter awaits, whispering secrets yet untold.